Hello, my name is Ben. Recently I've been getting into some online discussions about the Wii U, specifically its cooling solution and whether or not it would be possible to overclock it if you were to have a way to modulate the clock speed so that you're not accelerating its processes but just increasing the amount of available capacity for processing. But regardless, it's not really that relevant for what I'm going to be doing today. But what I'm going to be doing is just disassembling this and showing people what is actually going on. This is a delidded one, unfortunately, because I did want to show off the process of delidding and why it's necessary, or at least why it's a good idea, because the IHS has a thermal pad between the chips, the IHS, and then between the IHS and the heatsink. And these go bad over time. They dry out and turn to like a chalk and just don't cool anymore, really. So it's a good idea to change it out, to remove the IHS altogether. And people were saying online that this shouldn't be possible, there's too much clearance because you're removing so much material in between that there won't be good contact. So this is partly just to show that there is still good contact, and it gives me an opportunity to clean out the system and put some new thermal paste on. So let's dig in. I do have the special security bits that Nintendo uses. They've been using them for quite a while now, these like Y-shaped bits, and I'm not a fan of this practice, but you know, big companies gotta do what they want to make sure that you can't repair your stuff, which is anti-consumer. So thanks, Nintendo. You're doing great. I think they still use these on the Switch. I'm not sure, but I know they use them on the Wii. Pretty sure they use them on the GameCube. I haven't taken one of those apart before, but they definitely use them on the Wii U, and you can see those bits here. So you need a special Y tip. I don't know if there's a good way to show that. So yeah, they're not great. I'm not a fan. But the first step to taking apart a Wii U is pretty straightforward. You got to take off these 3 screws that are along here, and they're covered under these little black tabs that I took off, these little stickers, just to hide the screws. But I'll just take these out, just keeping it on a little tray. And then you slide this towards the back of the console, so this is where all the I/O is. Just take this and you slide it back. You'll see a gap here between the covers, so if I slide it like that, and then it should pull straight out. You can set that aside, and then you have 3 more of these security screws that hold the frame together, and then there's another one hidden right under this sticker. So just take some tweezers and pull out the sticker, and you can see another one. So these are structural screws. These are what actually clamp the case down. So you don't want to lose them, and you do need the correct bit to take them apart. If you try using a Phillips bit, it just won't work. A flathead won't work either, just because of the like triangle design. Whenever you see an odd number of points on a screw, you definitely need a security bit. So like for example, this is obviously 3, but Macs use pentalobe screw bits, and so there are 5 slots on the screw, and that makes it very difficult to take apart because of the fact that if you put a flathead in, it'll just kind of like rotate from one point to the next in opposing ways, so it won't grip in any way and start twisting, which is very much intentional. Another thing is, once you get those out, you have to take the CMOS battery out. It is screwed into the frame, so you should take that out. And after that, you should be able to pop this off. You just lift up the cover from the back side so it separates from the rest of the console, and then you can lift it out backwards. This is kind of tough because it has these rubber feet, and they kind of lock in between here, so it's easier to kind of like pry those up a little bit and then pull it off. It's a little bit of an intimidating process, but it also helps to make it a little easier as you remove this side cover that goes on these little filters. And if you remove these, then it makes it a lot easier to take off this top part, so I'm going to be doing that. But you can't remove it without taking this off, so you just kind of have to get it into a looser state than what it was originally. Of course, it's much more difficult when I'm trying to explain it. I don't know, I'm sure people will correct me on the proper way to take this thing apart, but it's just how the internet is. Everyone's going to correct you. I'm sure there's a better way to do it. There's always a better way. And take out this one as well. Need a bigger bit for that one. And now that, I don't know if it's better actually to do the top. Oh yeah, it's way better to do the top or the bottom. Yeah, that's way better. But if you've ever seen, But if you've ever seen the inside of a Wii U before, you'll notice that this one's pretty different. This one has a hard drive in it, and you never get one with a hard drive in it. They don't come like that. So there's no cover on the main disk drive. They normally have a metal plate that goes to encase the drive itself, and then there's another metal case that goes around it. I think it's either structural or just to like dampen the noise that you get from the disk spinning, 'cause it can be annoying. But I took that out so I could fit this slim 1 terabyte hard drive in. This is USB, so I just have a cable going down. It goes through the underneath of the board. I clipped off a little bit of the metal so I could route a wire to the back USB port here, so I could have a permanent drive in it. Never have to have a USB stick or anything. Actually, I think no, never mind. I put that to the front USB. It doesn't matter. They do the same thing, but the point is that I have an internal hard drive that makes it a lot easier to transport this whole system. I don't have to bother with an external drive that I need to remember to plug in order to play any of the games, and it's just a permanent solution, which is, to me, it was worth it, but it might not be worth the effort to you. Once you're at this point in time, you can just unscrew these screws that hold on the front plate, and you have to be mindful of the ribbon cable. So with this ribbon cable, you have to actually push the tab on the board up like this, in this direction, and then you can pull it out. And then when you want to lock it, you push it down. So it kind of like wedges itself in. And then now that you're at this point, you can just lift the whole system out of the chassis, of the plastic casing. If I can get stuck. There we go. So here's the whole system out of the chassis. Set that aside. And now I can start the rest of the disassembly. So normally you want to start with the disk drive. I gotta unplug my hard drive, of course, because the cable is on top of that. But you can, normally there's screws that go here, but because I removed this top part that normally goes around the whole thing, there's nothing to screw it into, so these are just open. But you can take apart the screws, or you unscrew this screw on the side. There's one on the opposing side as well that hold on the disk drive. And the disk drive does have a ribbon cable, so you're going to need to be mindful of that when you lift it up. You don't want to be tearing that ribbon cable. You will permanently destroy it, and it's very short. So what I do is I flip this back to expose the ribbon cable. And then now that we have the ribbon cable exposed, you just take something small. You probably shouldn't be using tweezers because you don't want to cut the ribbon, but you just lift up the tab, and then you can lift the ribbon cable out, and then there's your disk drive, and in my case also a hard drive that I just sticky tape to the back. So here's the rest of the system. It has all this shielding, metal plate shielding, and there are just a ton of screws that hold all of that on. But first things first, you got to take off the Wi-Fi module, Wi-Fi antennas. They just have little tabs that you push down on, and then you can just pull it out. So same thing on the other side. You just This is another thing I changed. These are some resistors that just lower the fan RPM, because I like running this a long time and leaving it on because I can access files over FTP, so I leave it on, and the fan was getting annoying while I was sleeping, so I just put some resistors in line. It's not necessary, but the same thing with this side, this antenna. You just push this tab down, and it flexes out of the way so you can pull out the antenna. And same thing on all the other ones. This one, the tab is pretty loose, but the other one here, this one just pushes down, and then you slide the antenna out this way. And then these antennas just kind of go on these little tabs here that hold them in place. And there's normally this tape, but over time the stickiness of the tape kind of becomes non-existent, so it doesn't really hold it down anymore. You don't really need to worry about it. And you take out the fan. Just has some screws on either side holding it in, and of course the connector needs to be removed. Take out the fan, and then you want to deal with this black shroud that goes around the heatsink. So it's just got one black screw on the side here. The screws are kind of color-coded, where the longer screws are black and they go into the black shroud, so I guess it makes it easier to remember which screws go where. But they are longer, so you will need to make sure that they're in the right spots, otherwise they won't fit properly. And so once you get to this point where the screws are off, to remove this, you just slide it back a little bit, and then you should be able to pull off. And this heatsink is looking pretty clean. This is the little cover that goes over the heatsink. Again, it's one of those just slide it back and comes off. But here's the actual heatsink. I'm not going to go any farther into this because it's just not necessary. I don't need to take off all this shrouding to get to the processors. If you were to do a delid, you would need to take it off just to give you more access to properly attack the heatsink, or the IHS rather. So, you know, it's best practice to undo these screws in a star pattern, just to, you know, not put too much strain on the chips. We'll see how the old thermal paste I put on here held up. It's been about 8 months since I put it on. Maybe a little longer than that actually, but yeah, it's looking pretty good. Here we have the GPU, and here is the CPU. These are not very powerful processors, but they make do for what they are intended to do. This thermal paste is not great, and it's pretty messy, so I'm going to be replacing it, but things are looking pretty good here. When the IHS is here, I don't have it with me right now, but it just has this like silicone rubber kind of material that goes around the sides, and then there's a thermal pad that goes on top of the processors to the IHS. In order to take off the IHS, it's best to just find like a razor blade and just gradually run it along, starting where this little opening is in the glue. It's hard to tell on the camera, but there's like there with the reflection, you can see that there isn't any glue right there. There's no residue. So you want to just start attacking it with the very edge and just slide it under, and then you can just run it along the whole length of the glue, and it should pop off. So, and that's the way that I did it, and that's the way I recommend you doing it. So I'm just going to grab a napkin here to clean off all this excess thermal paste. This stuff is an absolute mess. This one is like a silvery compound. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, as long as it can dissipate the heat. And it just gets over everything, and everything gets super shiny, and I hate this stuff. It's definitely one of the worst pastes I've used just for cleanliness reasons. But normally you should be using cotton swabs to remove this, but I don't care. It's fine. Just don't break off any of the filtering capacitors that are on the substrate, and you'll be fine. You can use some like isopropyl to get this stuff off. But again, it's not a big deal if it is on there. I'll grab a couple cotton swabs. Maybe I'll just do it. I'll just use some acetone. Get a little bit of acetone, and that should get it right off. But it just is such a mess. Yeah, it's just kind of spreading it around at this point. So there are actually 3 dies on the substrate: the GPU, the CPU, and what I'm assuming is the I/O die. Not exactly sure, but it would not surprise me if that was for the interfacing, since it is rather small, and at the end of the day, this only has a couple of interfaces. It's got the USB, SD card, and then I guess the video outs, which are handled on a separate chip anyway. So, not sure. It's probably just the USB interfacing. I don't know if it's on board or off board or on the substrate. Doesn't really matter. But there, now it's clean enough. I'm going to just take my new thermal paste, apply a little bit onto the die. It's the GPU die, CPU, and then that little whatever it is die. And you can spread it around if you so desire. It doesn't make a huge difference. As long as it has good enough contact to keep the die cool, everything should be fine. Yep, that's fine. And now I can just put the heatsink back on. It does have an orientation. Doesn't need to go this way. Otherwise, the big shroud here, this won't fit. It's got these holes on one side that allow air to go around the heatsink in a specific way so that you can get air through, and then it goes through the fins. Same thing on the front, and on the other side, you don't want to be flipping it around. It won't be a good mount either, because this is offset with the intent that it is mounted in this direction. So just make sure you do that. This is the stock direction. You won't be able to mount it properly if it isn't. And something that I got into online is that these have a lot of travel. This is all of the length that the spring can compress. It screws down this much into the actual frame. So there's quite a bit of length that it can screw down, and that the amount of material that you removing the IHS and the original thermal pads, is only like a few, maybe like 3 millimeters at most. So there's plenty of distance to be gained from just removing that. So yeah, again, you want to be mounting in a star pattern just for a good flat mount and distribution of the paste. I'm just not screwing them down quite yet, because I want to get all of them on, make sure that it's flat, and then I can start screwing them down more in the same star pattern. Maybe I'll get critiques about this too, who knows, but it's fine. So even with the screws all the way down, they are physically on the board now, the screws themselves. The heatsink itself isn't touching the screws. It just has these springs, and so the springs are compressed, and they'll just push the heatsink down into the die. So it really isn't an issue that there isn't that extra thickness of the pads and the IHS. It really doesn't actually matter for this, because the mounting solution is very relaxed tolerance of not having those materials. So it's perfectly fine to not have them. And just re-putting this on, you need to make sure that you get it in the right orientation. You get this down, and then it should slot into these little holes that are right here in the metal frame. You get that mounted down. It has also another little tab here that slots in. Hard to see, but there's a little metal tab sticking up from this plate, and it just lines up with a hole here to keep everything aligned properly. Same thing on the other side. So now that that's on, I can put the shroud back on. And again, just a reverse order of what you did to take it off. It has a tab. I can show them actually. It has these tabs right here, and then another one on the other side right here, these little hooks. And these little hooks. And those slot into these holes right here and here on the metal plate. So you put that on, and then you just slide it forward, making sure that those tabs go into the holes. And at this point, it's already pretty secure, but again, just putting back the screws that were originally holding it down. There's one that goes here, and another one on the other side. Okay, and then now that that's on, you can, it doesn't matter which one you do, but you can do the fan first, or you can put the Wi-Fi cables back, Wi-Fi antennas. This is a dual band system, so there are actually, it's not a dual band chip for the Wi-Fi. There are two separate Wi-Fi modules and then a Bluetooth module, so it actually has 3 different chips for wireless interfacing. And the Bluetooth one is this little one right here, and the other 2 are underneath, the Wi-Fi 2.4 and the Wi-Fi 5 gigahertz. And the 5 gigahertz is what interfaces with your gamepad. It's what sends the video signal to the gamepad. And the 2.4 gigahertz is what you use for an internet connection. So it is pretty interesting how they chose to do it, I find. I mean, it doesn't make a huge difference, but the Wi-Fi 2.4 gigahertz is rather slow for an internet connection. But this thing did come out in 2012, so people were a little more tolerant of slow Wi-Fi speeds back then, I guess. I don't care too much, because if I am going to be downloading something or playing online games, I'll just use a Ethernet adapter to the USB ports. So that's usually what I'll do, but even then you're still limited by the 2.4 or the USB 2 interface, which is also pretty slow. So it doesn't really make a huge difference. It is a lot faster than 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi though, so I guess there's that if you really care that much, which it's, again, not a big deal to me. But just routing these cables back in to keep them organized. These little coax cables that are attached to the Wi-Fi antennas. Can't remember if this goes like this. I think it's like this. It's like, God, this is annoying. Am I putting this on the wrong side? No. There we go. So yeah, just pushing the cables through these tabs. There's another one down here. Then there's the tape that you can put on it, but again, it lost solid stick, so whatever, don't care. Can put this other cable for the antenna back on. And you can see what my solution for the USB was, the USB cable to the hard drive. I put it through the slot where the Wi-Fi cables come out, right here. And then I can get the disk drive back on. I'm just going to install it reverse order of the way that I took it off. So just putting the ribbon cable back in this orientation makes it the easiest. There, it's in there are little like corners that are on this cable. I'll take it out just to show you. Little corners here, these little tabs, and those need to be fully in order for the cable to properly seat. And so make sure that they are, and then put that down, the clip down, then you can rotate it back up onto these mounts and get the screws and push them, screw them back in. And the other side, of course. And there would be two on the front here if you didn't do what I did and remove that cover plate on the drive itself, because it was definitely necessary. The amount of space that I had to fit this hard drive was very restrictive. They left very little room. This hard drive is only probably like 5 or 6 millimeters thick. I even removed the plastic case that went around it, and even then it still barely fits within the chassis. It is a very tight fit, but it works, so don't have to worry about it, I guess. It's perfectly fine. Just routing the cable. I left a bit too much extra cable length, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. Just a little more cabling in the way. But now that I have that on, I can put it back into the bottom part of the chassis. So there's the bottom part. Can get it so that the fan lines up with this. Oh, this is the top. Oops. Get this bottom part on. Just lift up the whole thing. Line it up with where it needs to go. And it should just kind of fall into place. Now that that's in place, I'm going to do the front plate. You need to line up these slots for the USB ports and the SD card in order to get this on. And then it should slot in. You can add the screws on the sides that hold it down. You screw into the same supports for the disk drive. The case of this whole board is actually really well designed. The layout and the whole structure of the console, I think, is pretty elegant. Having the distribution of everything is pretty well done. The Wii actually looks very similar internally. Same kind of structure, but the heatsink is smaller because it's not as much of a thermal load, and it's just a bit more compact because there's just not as much stuff. This has better Wi-Fi antennas. It needs more Wi-Fi antenna range because it is broadcasting a video signal to the gamepad, so it needs more. And the heatsink is just bigger, so there's just more space in this direction for the heatsink and the fan to fit. Whereas in the Wii, it's just a little bit smaller, so the disk drive is just shifted more. So there's just just a smaller length. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same in the horizontal direction. Very similar layouts, almost identical internally if you ask me. So very similar, which makes perfect sense because it is just one generation newer. But then obviously you need to put everything back in the reverse order of the order you took it apart. So putting the little foot tab back in. Where'd the other one go? That's still on the case here. You can put it back there. And then there's a little cover for the fan. It just kind of slots in on these little slots here. And this is where a lot of the dust likes to collect. And you just put it in at an angle. It should be flush up against the front here. And then you have to be mindful of these tabs to making sure that the rubber tabs are going into place. My USB cable isn't routed properly right now. Otherwise it should be flat. Get that. There we go. Okay. And again, you also need the original fan or just dust filter that goes here. There is a screw that mounts it to the frame. I usually wait to fill that in so that I have a little more mobility with this main top cover. But another thing to note is that these feet are designed to allow this to be put in, the cover to be put in an angle and then slot down. So you put the larger tab towards the bottom, on the bottom case, and you need the angle to be facing towards the front of the console. And that allows you to put this in at an angle, which I think is the intended way of putting the chassis back together. It slots in, and then you can just rotate it down. Need to get this fan shroud aligned, and then it just rotates down, just like that. And it should kind of fit into place here once everything is aligned. I don't know if I got that cable down all the way, so it's not clamping down all the way. Maybe I need to move that cable. Something's blocking it. This is what I get for doing my own thing. Yeah, this cable came up. Push it down with this tweezer. That should be good. This fit before, so shouldn't have any issues now. Put the tab back in for the foot. And there, now it's mounted properly. Once I screw it down, it'll be pretty flush. But to start the screwing down process, you want to start with the chassis frame, with the chassis screws. These have the security bit, the Y bit. You're just going to have to buy one of these, or the one of the iFixit kits that I'm using. It comes with it, so if you want to get one of those, it'll have it. Still don't quite understand why they bothered making two versions of this console, why there needs to be an 8GB version in the first place, because that's just a pathetic amount of storage. You're basically forced to use an external drive at that point, so you can't even fit Breath of the Wild on that. So, don't know why they even bothered. I guess the only legitimate use case would be to store your save games on that. But it's or maybe some like WiiWare, but again, it's just such a small amount. I don't know why they even bothered. And then again, these other security screws, bigger ones, they go into the front, hold the cover on the front down. One of the things that I think is a little interesting, and I don't quite understand the exact reasoning behind it, is that the ribbon cable is actually accessible when the case is in this state. Even with the main covers on, you can still get to it through this hole right here. And I guess it's just to check that you have a good mount, or maybe part of the assembly process is that they save that for later. I don't know. But in any case, just gotta put these screws back in. Change out for the regular Phillips bit. And I just put this longer screw in. Hold down this dust filter. And there's a fatter version of that one. It's not fatter, just shorter version of the same threaded screw. It's a very fine thread on this screw. And that one goes right above the CMOS battery. So I think that, I can't tell from the outside, but what my suspicion is that's holding through the disk drive into the plastic frame. So it's like pushing the frame into the drive, flexing it into place. I can put the CMOS battery back now. Again, just a regular Phillips bit. And then I can put this cover that we slid off at the beginning back on. So that just, same way it came off, put it in with a little bit of this gap. It's probably like 3 millimeters. And you just slide it down, and it should be flush right here. And you just put the screws in. And I'm not sure if these are the exact right screws for this spot. I'm pretty sure these had the security screws at some point, but I think I just mixed up the order. I might not have, because there are security screws under this, so it wouldn't make any difference to how easily it is to take off, but doesn't make a huge difference. I don't know if I put the third one. Yeah, whatever, it's not even structural. Just holds that from sliding, so this doesn't even matter. Some people might get mad at that, but I don't care. And you can just put the little stickers that cover up the screws back on. There is one of them that is bigger than the others, and that's because this one has a bigger screw, because the security screw that holds the frame together is not covered by anything except a sticker. So there's a bigger screw head, so bigger sticker. Stickers lose their stick after you take them off and on again, since I've done this a few times now to install that hard drive. I would offer to do that for someone if they wanted to send it in, because it's kind of fun. If they sent in a hard drive and the console, I probably would do it for them. I don't know if I'd charge or anything, but it would just be fun to do, because it is pretty useful to have that much internal storage, because I don't think that the 32 gigabytes is nearly enough, even with the better version. So, but there you go. Oh, there's the other screw sitting on the table. Yeah, there you go. That's the console put back together. The new thermal paste. Yeah, there's the stickers. Yeah, they don't hold their stick anymore. I guess one way of rejuvenating that a little bit is just to take a tiny bit of acetone and just soak the adhesive in it. I just get a little bit on the Q-tip here. Put a little bit on this sticker. Hopefully that'll get the adhesive to stick better. I guess if I leave it, the acetone will dry out and get the sticker to stay, but no guarantees, since the adhesive just goes out and just dries up and goes bad. Got more of that thermal paste, this shiny stuff on. But yeah, there you go. That's the Wii U. Thanks for watching.